Kitchen Confidential. This video is based on key insights from the book Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. Appetizer. Anthony Bourdain begins by making it clear he genuinely loves the restaurant world, despite everything. He's a highly trained chef, currently preparing basic ingredients like stocks and cutting meat, showing he's still deeply involved in the work. He isn't writing to complain or scare people away from restaurants. He wants to share what it's really like, because he still identifies with the people he works with, cooks and chefs, more than anyone else. If he ever needs help, he knows he'd call a fellow kitchen worker, not someone from outside the industry. Bourdain describes the restaurant world as a unique culture, almost like the military, with a strict order but also a lot of craziness. He finds this strangely comforting, a place where he understands the rules and feels at home. He wants his fellow professionals to enjoy the book as a truthful portrayal of their shared experiences, a life lived outside of typical social routines, often working when everyone else is off. He acknowledges that some might not like his honesty, but they'll recognize it as real. The author's goal is to show readers the joy of creating excellent food and what it feels like to lead a kitchen team, a pirate crew, as he puts it. He wants to capture the sights, sounds, and even the rough humor of a busy restaurant kitchen. He hopes even people who don't work in restaurants will understand that, despite the challenges, this life can be rewarding. Bourdain compares himself to Chuck Wepner, a boxer known for being tough and resilient, always willing to fight even when facing a strong opponent. He's not a super chef, but a reliable, experienced cook. Bourdain explains he's worked in many kitchens, including some very famous ones, and is often called in to fix situations when other chefs fail. This book isn't about bragging, but about the everyday cooks who make things happen. He's made a good living in Manhattan for years and knows the industry inside and out. However, he's aware that being so honest could hurt his career. He anticipates sharing stories about difficult behavior, substance abuse, and questionable food practices, like why ordering fish on a Monday isn't a good idea, or why well-done steaks get the leftovers. He's also upfront about his strong opinions, admitting he doesn't care for vegetarians, people who put sauce on the side, or certain celebrity chefs like Emeril Lagasse. He doesn't expect invitations to fancy events or TV appearances. But he's determined to be truthful about his experiences, presenting both the good and the bad. He wants to give readers a complete picture, showing them how to make great food while also making them think twice about certain dishes. Ultimately, Bourdain views his career as a fulfilling, if sometimes crazy, love affair. He remembers the positive aspects most fondly, the things that drew him in and kept him coming back. He's never regretted choosing this path and believes that good food is always a bit of a risk, whether it's trying something unusual or working with challenging people. For him, food has always been an adventure. First course. Anthony Bourdain's journey toward becoming a chef truly began not with a love of cooking, but with a fascination for the world around cooking. His early experiences with food were pretty basic, Campbell's soup and simple meals. But a cold soup, vichyssoise, on a family trip to Europe sparked something in him, a realization that food could be more than just fuel. This initial curiosity was followed by a more profound awakening during a summer in France, where he discovered a world of flavors and a lifestyle that both intrigued and challenged him. However, it wasn't fancy French cuisine that ultimately hooked Bourdain. It was the gritty reality of a restaurant kitchen. After drifting through college, he found himself washing dishes at the Dreadnought in Provincetown, Massachusetts. This wasn't a glamorous job, but it offered a backstage pass to a hidden world. The restaurant was a chaotic, lively place, full of colorful characters, cooks, waitresses, and a manager who seemed to run on booze and stolen goods. Bourdain quickly realized that the kitchen wasn't just about preparing food. It was a world of its own, with its own rules and its own kind of freedom. The cooks at the Dreadnought weren't just skilled with a knife. They were rebels, living outside the normal rules. They drank, smoked, and generally lived life on their own terms. Bourdain was captivated by their confidence and their disregard for convention. He saw them as adventurers, and he wanted to be one too. He began to see the kitchen as a place where anything could happen, a place where you could be truly yourself, even if that self was a little rough around the edges. Bourdain's initial tasks were humble peeling potatoes, cleaning shrimp, but he was paying attention. He observed the cooks, learning their techniques and absorbing their attitude. He moved up to salad station, a small step forward, but it gave him a closer view of the action. He was still an outsider, but he was getting closer to the inner circle. The turning point came during a busy night with a wedding party. While the happy couple and their guests enjoyed their meals, Bourdain witnessed the chef engaging in a shockingly inappropriate encounter with the bride. It was a wild, chaotic scene, and it solidified something in Bourdain's mind. He didn't necessarily admire the chef's behavior, but he recognized the power and the freedom that came with being in charge of the kitchen. It was a world of intense pressure, creativity, and a complete lack of boundaries. That moment, witnessing the chef's brazen act, wasn't about wanting to copy the behavior. It was about wanting to be the one in control, the one calling the shots. It was about wanting to be a master of his own domain, a world where he could create, shock, and ultimately define his own rules. Bourdain realized that being a chef wasn't just about cooking. It was about power, passion, and a life lived on the edge. It was a realization that would set him on a path toward a remarkable and unconventional career. Anthony Bourdain paints a vivid picture of the restaurant world in 1974, Provincetown, Massachusetts, a place far removed from the celebrity chef culture we know today. He describes a time when food wasn't about fancy techniques or famous names, but about hard work, raw skill, and a certain rough-around-the-edges attitude. The early 70s culinary scene was basic. Squid was cheap, tuna was for cats, and fish was often overcooked with just butter and paprika. Success in the kitchen wasn't measured by awards, but by how many meals a cook could get out during a busy night and how much they could endure. Bourdain fondly remembers cooks like Jimmy Lester, the broiler king, who was admired for his speed and style while handling steaks. It wasn't about delicate plating. It was about getting food out quickly and efficiently, even if it meant a little messiness. Mishandling equipment with flair was actually respected, a sign of confidence and experience. This environment valued toughness and a willingness to push limits, both in the kitchen and outside of it. The author contrasts the atmosphere at the Dreadnought, where he worked with the crew at Mario's restaurant, a hugely successful Italian place across the street. The Mario team were the top dogs, doing far more business, and possessing a swagger that intimidated Bourdain and his colleagues. They had their own unique slang, a mix of old-fashioned language and military jargon, and they weren't shy about flaunting their success. They were loud, confident, and clearly the best in town. Bourdain introduces Howard Mitchum, the only chef in town with any real reputation. Despite being often drunk and difficult to understand, Howard was a respected figure, known for his cookbooks and his love of local seafood, especially the often overlooked varieties like squid and bluefish. He championed Portuguese-influenced cuisine, like kale soup with chorizo, and celebrated the humble clam. Howard hosted an annual clam bake, a huge party that brought together locals and restaurant workers. To Bourdain, Howard represented a different side of cooking, a love for the food itself, not just the business of it. The author recalls a particularly memorable night when a massive school of striped bass swam close to shore, allowing fishermen and cooks to easily catch them. The entire town descended into a frenzy of cleaning, filleting, and freezing fish. Bourdain describes the experience of cooking and eating a freshly caught bass under the moonlight as a revelation, a moment that solidified his passion for food. Bourdain's ambition to become a broiler man like the pros at the Dreadnought was short-lived. He attempted to impress the crew at Mario's, showing up in a flashy suit and boasting about his experience. However, he quickly realized he was out of his depth. The Mario kitchen was a well-oiled machine, and Bourdain's inexperience and arrogance were quickly exposed. After burning himself and asking for a Band-Aid, he was humiliated by Tyrone, the formidable broiler man, who showed him the battle scars of a true kitchen warrior. This experience was a turning point for Bourdain. He resolved to get serious about cooking, to attend culinary school, and to learn from the best. He vowed to return, not as a boastful amateur, but as a skilled and respected chef. The author's humbling experience fueled his determination to master the craft and prove himself in the demanding world of professional cooking. Anthony Bourdain's journey took an unexpected turn after his time at Vassar College. Feeling restless and a bit rebellious, he decided to attend the Culinary Institute of America, CIA, despite his past behavior making him unpopular with many of his former friends. He wasn't particularly worried about getting in, using a connection to smooth the application process. The author found the strict, uniform-focused environment of the CIA a stark contrast to his previous life, but he was ready for a change. At the CIA, Bourdain immediately stood out, not for his skills, but for his professional-grade knives amidst the standard student equipment. He was older than most classmates and had some prior experience in the food industry, giving him an edge. He wasn't afraid to take advantage of his peers, winning money from them in card games and even selling them drugs, viewing them as naive newcomers to a tough industry. This reveals a cynical side to Bourdain, believing the restaurant world was a harsh place where people learned quickly, often through unpleasant experiences. The author's time at the CIA was marked by a mix of genuine learning and shortcuts. While he grasped the fundamentals of cooking, he wasn't above using pre-made bases to enhance his stocks, fooling his instructors. Bourdain describes the school's curriculum in 1975 as focused on traditional, heavy French cuisine, a style he found somewhat outdated but still valuable for learning technique. He enjoyed the more artistic aspects of cooking, like sugar work and charcuterie, and found humor in the often grueling work of butchery. Bourdain's experiences in vegetable cookery class, under the intimidating Chef Bagna, highlighted the pressure and intensity of a professional kitchen. He also recalls a bizarre Oriental cookery class where the instructor used lessons about Japanese cuisine to deliver a passionate and disturbing lecture about the atrocities committed during World War II. These experiences show the author's exposure to eccentric personalities and unconventional teaching methods. After graduating, Bourdain and a friend, Dimitri, put their newly acquired skills to the test in Provincetown, Massachusetts. They started a catering business, Moonlight Menus, initially fueled by ambition, cocaine, and a willingness to exaggerate their abilities. They catered events for a wealthy and often shady clientele, creating elaborate dishes and displays that were more about showmanship than substance. Bourdain and Dimitri thrived on the chaos and the opportunity to outsmart their customers, building a reputation for extravagance and exclusivity. Their most ambitious project was a Colosseum of seafood blanquette, a massive pastry creation filled with seafood stew. Despite facing numerous challenges and relying on a bit of luck, they pulled it off, earning praise and solidifying their reputation. This success emboldened them to dream even bigger, setting their sights on conquering the New York City culinary scene. Bourdain's narrative reveals a pattern of taking risks, bending the rules, and finding a strange sort of satisfaction in the unpredictable world of professional cooking. Second course, Anthony Bourdain pulls back the curtain on the restaurant world, revealing it's not about fancy recipes, but about the people actually doing the work. He explains that the chef you see is often just a manager, and the real cooking is done by a crew of hardworking, often overlooked individuals. These cooks aren't necessarily culinary school graduates dreaming of fame. They're often motivated by money and a unique lifestyle, and they're frequently immigrants who bring a strong work ethic and loyalty to the kitchen. Bourdain describes skilled line cooks as almost artistic in their movements, needing speed, cleanliness, and endurance. He emphasizes that consistency is key. A chef doesn't want creativity, but reliable execution of existing recipes. He shares a story about a fellow chef who prefers hiring Ecuadorian cooks over Italian cooks because they are less likely to argue and more likely to simply follow instructions, highlighting a preference for obedience and hard work over passionate debate. The author points out that American-born cooks can sometimes be seen as lazy and entitled, lacking the discipline found in immigrant cooks who understand the value of hard work. He notes that many of these cooks have worked their way up from the bottom, starting as dishwashers, and bring a valuable understanding of the entire restaurant operation. Bourdain stresses the importance of loyalty and reliability, stating a good cook doesn't call in sick easily. He acknowledges the changing landscape of the industry, noting that exploited immigrant cooks are less common now, and skilled cooks from places like Ecuador and Mexico are well-compensated professionals. He values their experience and dedication, contrasting it with cooks who expect special treatment. Bourdain also appreciates having women on the line, describing them as tough, funny, and a positive influence in a typically male-dominated environment, sharing anecdotes about female cooks who weren't afraid to stand up for themselves. Bourdain then dives into the importance of mise en place, the meticulous preparation and organization of ingredients. He explains it's a cook's sacred space, and disrupting it is a serious offense. A clean and organized station is essential for efficiency and focus. He illustrates this with a story of a chef inspecting a messy station, equating the mess to a disorganized mind. He also humorously describes the lengths cooks will go to hoard clean towels, essential for maintaining a sanitary and safe workspace. He continues by offering advice to diners, warning against ordering fish on Mondays, as it's likely several days old. He cautions against specials and brunch menus, suggesting they're often used to get rid of older ingredients. He emphasizes the importance of observing the restaurant's cleanliness and the staff's attitude as indicators of food quality. Bourdain also shares his willingness to take risks with food, acknowledging that sometimes you might get sick, but the experience is worth it. Ultimately, Bourdain celebrates the dedication and often unconventional lives of line cooks, describing them as fringe elements drawn to the unique challenges and freedoms of the kitchen. He categorizes them as artists, exiles, and mercenaries, recognizing that each type contributes to the chaotic energy of a professional kitchen. He values a strong work ethic and a willingness to follow orders, preferring a reliable professional over a self-proclaimed artist. He concludes by encouraging diners to be adventurous and embrace the risks that come with exploring new flavors and cuisines. Anthony Bourdain begins by admitting that truly cooking like a professional chef isn't something everyone needs to do. He finds simple, home-cooked meals incredibly comforting, even more so than the fancy dishes he creates at work. He shares how his mother-in-law always apologized for her cooking, thinking it wouldn't measure up to his standards, but he secretly loved its simplicity. This sets the stage for his real topic, what it takes to appear to cook like a pro. Bourdain quickly dismisses the idea that you need a ton of expensive equipment. He points out that many of the things restaurants use special oils, chopped herbs, purees are made with regular kitchen tools. The one essential, he insists, is a good chef's knife. He strongly advises against buying huge sets of knives, calling most of them useless. A single, comfortable, high-quality chef's knife is all anyone really needs. He contrasts the heavy, traditional German knives with the lighter, easier-to-sharpen Japanese global knives, ultimately recommending the latter for most home cooks. He stresses the importance of learning to use a knife properly, recommending Jacques Pepin's book for instruction. He briefly mentions a few other useful knives, a flexible boning knife and a serrated offset knife, but emphasizes that these aren't essential. The author then moves on to the tricks professionals use to make food look impressive. He highlights the simple plastic squeeze bottle, used for artfully drizzling sauces, and explains how easily it can elevate a dish's presentation. He playfully points out how a little swirl of sauce can make something simple look like a complicated work of art. He then describes how metal rings are used to stack food high on the plate, creating a visually dramatic effect. He explains how a mandolin slicer can quickly create perfectly uniform vegetable cuts, something that would take a long time to do by hand. He even suggests buying used restaurant equipment at auctions, as it's often much cheaper and higher quality than new home versions. He emphasizes the importance of having heavy-bottomed pots and pans, as thin ones will burn food. Bourdain then dives into the ingredients that separate restaurant food from home cooking. He stresses the importance of shallots, butter, roasted garlic, chiffonaded parsley, and most importantly, stock. He explains that stock is the foundation of good sauces and flavors, and encourages readers to make their own. He also mentions demi-glace, a rich sauce made from stock, and how it can elevate a dish. Finally, he emphasizes the importance of fresh herbs and thoughtful garnishes, explaining that even a simple sprig of parsley can make a big difference. He provides a quick example of a roasted fish dish, demonstrating how simple ingredients and careful presentation can create a restaurant-quality meal. The chapter shifts to a more critical tone, exploring the reasons why so many people fail in the restaurant business. Bourdain describes owner's syndrome, the tendency for people with no real experience to open restaurants based on ego, romantic notions, or a midlife crisis. He explains how these owners often lack the necessary knowledge and capital, and make poor decisions that lead to failure. He contrasts them with experienced restaurateurs who know their limits and avoid overexpansion. He also warns against opening a restaurant simply out of love for a particular cuisine or theme, as passion alone isn't enough to succeed. He paints a picture of the relentless demands of the business, the constant problems, and the need for total dedication. He concludes by highlighting the rare individuals, like his mentor, Bigfoot, who are truly suited for the restaurant world, possessing the skills, discipline, and unwavering commitment needed to thrive. Anthony Bourdain first encountered Bigfoot, a larger-than-life figure in the West Village restaurant scene, during his time with the CIA. Bigfoot wasn't known for his cooking skills, but for running a tight ship and a reputation that preceded him. Rumors even suggested he'd been in a fight that resulted in someone's death. Bourdain quickly learned Bigfoot's nickname game, being dubbed Flacco, a way to distinguish him from another employee. Bigfoot's attention to detail was immediately apparent, even extending to proofreading Bourdain's book and pointing out a simple typo. The chapter reveals a glimpse into the demanding world of professional kitchens. Bourdain describes Bigfoot as a complex character, intimidating, manipulative, but also fiercely loyal and inspiring. He wasn't a chef himself, but possessed an uncanny understanding of food costs, preparation, and efficiency. He knew exactly how much yield to expect from each cook handling a particular fish, keeping detailed records. This illustrates the intense pressure and scrutiny common in high-end restaurants, where even small inefficiencies could impact profits. Bourdain emphasizes Bigfoot's unconventional management style. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, plunging toilets or tackling plumbing issues himself, refusing to pay for outside help. This hands-on approach, while sometimes extreme, fostered a sense of camaraderie and dedication among his staff. The story of the sewage pipe repair, involving tunneling under the walk-in, perfectly exemplifies Bigfoot's willingness to go to any length to solve a problem, even if it meant putting his employees in uncomfortable situations. The author recounts a period of personal struggle, hitting a low point in his career and battling addiction. It was Bigfoot who offered him a lifeline, a chance to work as a lunch cook. Despite Bourdain's rough state, Bigfoot extended trust by lending him a significant amount of money up front, a gesture that deeply impacted Bourdain and fueled his determination to prove himself. This highlights a surprising element of compassion within Bigfoot's tough exterior. Bigfoot's restaurant operated under strict rules. Punctuality was paramount, and any deviation was met with swift consequences. He valued honesty and despised deception, famously firing a waitress for lying about her flight being delayed. This illustrates the importance of reliability and integrity in Bigfoot's world. He also had a knack for squeezing the best deals from suppliers, often playing them against each other and meticulously checking every delivery. Bourdain notes that Bigfoot's true skill lay in recognizing character. He prioritized dependability and a strong work ethic over impressive resumes. He built a loyal team, often hiring people others dismissed, and investing in their skills, even training his porters in trades like plumbing and electrical work. This demonstrates a belief in second chances and the power of loyalty. The author concludes by reflecting on the lasting impact Bigfoot had on his career. He adopted Bigfoot's meticulous attention to detail, his emphasis on preparation, and his commitment to knowing everything that was happening in his kitchen and beyond. Bourdain strived to create the same level of loyalty and respect with his own staff, aiming to understand their motivations and anticipate their needs, just as Bigfoot had done. Ultimately, Bourdain learned from Bigfoot that success in the restaurant business wasn't just about cooking great food, but about building a strong team and maintaining unwavering control. Third course. Anthony Bourdain returned to New York City after culinary school, eager to put his training to work. He landed a job at the famous Rainbow Room, a huge and busy restaurant high above Rockefeller Center. It was a big step up from his previous jobs, but also a shock. The kitchen was incredibly hot, loud, and chaotic, filled with experienced cooks who didn't care much about fancy food, only about getting through the shift. Bourdain quickly learned that working in a high-end kitchen wasn't glamorous. It was hard work, with cooks regularly collapsing from the heat. The kitchen staff was a mix of different backgrounds, united by long hours and tough conditions. He describes a rough and tumble environment where cooks would playfully, and sometimes aggressively, interact with each other. The author notes the kitchen's atmosphere was like a jailhouse, full of tough guys and rough language. Early on, Bourdain had a run-in with Louis, a powerful cook who repeatedly harassed him. After enduring this for a while, Bourdain finally stood up for himself, stabbing Louis in the hand with a meat fork. This act earned him respect from the other cooks and marked a turning point in his acceptance into the kitchen's culture. He had made his bones. The work itself was relentless. Bourdain started with the lunch buffet, transforming leftovers into presentable dishes. He learned to be resourceful and creative, disguising old food with sauces and presentation. He also helped with massive banquets, where hundreds of meals were assembled on a production line. The author details the sheer volume of food and the speed at which it needed to be prepared. The Rainbow Room was a world of its own, with its own rules and quirks. Bourdain describes the strange habits of the staff, the black market betting pool, and the unusual banking system where cooks pooled their paychecks. He also witnessed the occasional celebrity sighting and the absurd demands of wealthy customers. Bourdain's skills grew, and he began working different stations in the kitchen. He learned from the veteran cooks, observing their techniques and their attitudes. He describes Juan, a tough Basque cook who seemed fearless and indestructible. Despite the chaos, Bourdain thrived, proving his ability to handle the pressure and keep up with the demands of the job. He eventually became shop steward, hoping to improve conditions for the kitchen staff. However, he quickly discovered that the union was more interested in maintaining the status quo than in fighting for the workers' rights. After being warned to step down, Bourdain resigned, realizing that challenging the system was a losing battle. He left the Rainbow Room with a newfound understanding of the restaurant business. It wasn't about the food, it was about survival. Bourdain learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, it's best to know when to walk away. Anthony Bourdain recounts his early years as a chef, painting a picture of the restaurant world that's far from glamorous. He begins by describing his time at Work Progress, a Soho restaurant he helped revive with friends from his past. They were young, ambitious cooks, confident in their skills and eager to shake up the New York food scene. They saw themselves as rock stars of the kitchen, aiming for greatness, but quickly realized they weren't alone in their aspirations. Patrick Clark, a rising chef at the Odeon, was a formidable competitor. Bourdain details the chaotic energy of their kitchen, fueled by drugs, rock music, and a rebellious spirit. They dreamed of a new American cuisine, but their plans included a bizarre scheme to disrupt a ski race for older chefs with ski poles and foie gras. This illustrates their youthful arrogance and desire to make a bold statement. However, the owners of Work Progress proved to be clueless, and Bourdain, along with his colleagues, easily dominated them, creating a kitchen culture that was wild and unrestrained. They even had dramatic rituals, like igniting brandy on the stovetop to mimic a scene from the movie Apocalypse Now, shocking both staff and owners. The author's narrative shifts to his experience at Tom's, a restaurant owned by a charming but inexperienced couple. Despite the owner's connections and a few celebrity diners drawn by their signature dishes, the restaurant struggled. Bourdain observes how Tom and Fred's dreams slowly crumbled, highlighting the harsh realities of the business. He notes the desperation of the owners, clinging to the hope of attracting famous faces and the cynical attitude of the staff. He admits to feeling disconnected from the work, relying on drugs to cope and recognizing the inevitable failure. Bourdain then describes his brief and disastrous stint at Rick's Cafe, a Bogart-themed restaurant that was doomed from the start. He acknowledges his pattern of taking jobs at restaurants already in trouble, chasing a paycheck rather than pursuing genuine culinary growth. He and Dimitri, a colleague from Work Progress, found themselves in another failing venture, numbing themselves with drugs and witnessing the slow demise of yet another restaurant. Throughout these experiences, Bourdain reveals a critical understanding of the restaurant industry. He shows how easily dreams can be crushed by bad management, financial problems, and the relentless pressure of the business. He also reflects on his own mistakes, admitting to prioritizing money over meaningful work and falling into a cycle of taking on hopeless cases. He portrays himself as a fixer, arriving too late to save failing restaurants, more like an undertaker than a rescuer. The author's early career, as he recounts it, was a chaotic mix of ambition, disillusionment, and self-destructive behavior, all set against the backdrop of a demanding and unforgiving industry. Anthony Bourdain begins his story arriving at Let's Call It Gino's, a huge Italian restaurant, to find cooks building machine guns in the bathroom. This immediately sets the tone for a chaotic and unsettling look behind the scenes of the restaurant world. The restaurant, owned by a mysterious figure known as the Silver Shadow, is a mess. No one seems to be in charge, orders pile up, and money disappears without a trace. Bourdain compares the scene to the movie Apocalypse Now, highlighting the feeling of being dropped into a crazy situation with no clear direction. The author explains how the Silver Shadow built his restaurant empire quickly, expanding from a small business into multiple high-end restaurants. However, this rapid growth led to disorganization and a lack of control. The Silver Shadow seemed more interested in starting new ventures than managing the ones he already had, buying supplies he'd later forget about and hiring chefs he didn't need. Bourdain found himself caught in this whirlwind, brought in on impulse to fix a failing bistro, only to be immediately sent to Baltimore. Baltimore, according to Bourdain, was a disappointment. Gino's there was struggling, supplies were unreliable, and the staff felt neglected. He describes a sense of doom hanging over the restaurant, a feeling that it was destined to fail. He was given meaningless tasks, like creating a brunch menu for a nearly empty dining room, and lived in a strange, unfurnished apartment. The author's journey to Baltimore highlights the disconnect between the glamorous image of the restaurant industry and the often grim reality of running a failing business. After a short stint in Baltimore, Bourdain is sent back to New York, landing him in the middle of even more chaos at the New York Gino's. This location, while busy, was riddled with illegal activity. He discovers the head of prep is a drug dealer, the general manager is often absent and seemingly intoxicated, and the restaurant is regularly visited by people demanding protection money. Bourdain details a system where rules were bent or broken constantly, from cooks using fake names to collect multiple paychecks to supplies being shuffled between locations. Bourdain quickly realizes his role isn't about cooking, but about cleaning up the mess. He's praised for firing the drug dealer and dealing with staffing issues, becoming the Silver Shadow's hatchet man. However, this newfound power comes at a cost. He falls back into drug use, using cocaine to cope with the stress and moral compromises. He describes a cycle of firing people, feeling guilty, and then seeking escape in drugs. Eventually, Bourdain quits, realizing he can't continue down this path. He enters a period he calls the wilderness years, working a series of low-paying, unfulfilling jobs. He bounces between various restaurants, often under assumed names, and witnesses the darker side of the industry. He encounters a colorful cast of characters, criminals, addicts, and people just trying to survive. These experiences further disillusion him and reinforce his desire to escape the restaurant world. The author's experiences at Billy's, a chicken restaurant owned by a man recently released from prison and connected to organized crime, represent a low point. He describes a bizarre environment where the owner's erratic behavior and connections to the mob created a chaotic and unsettling workplace. Bourdain details how the restaurant operated with a constant flow of shady dealings and questionable practices. He ultimately leaves, recognizing he needs to make a change in his life. The chapter concludes with Bourdain reflecting on his downward spiral and his growing desire to find a way out of the destructive cycle he's trapped in. Anthony Bourdain found himself in a tough spot, drifting after a series of failed jobs and feeling weighed down by past mistakes. He describes a period of unemployment marked by guilt and a sense of being lost, symbolized by a neglected Christmas tree rotting in his dining room. He desperately needed work, but the jobs he found were either ridiculous or soul-crushing. He recounts disastrous interviews, one at a restaurant themed around a television show where the food was terrible, and another where the owner seemed more interested in feng shui than running a business. Bourdain's search led him to a potential position at a steakhouse, a place he felt confident he could handle. He believed his extensive knowledge of meat and grilling would be a perfect fit. However, a pre-interview drink at a local pub led to a moment of honesty that cost him the job. When asked what he knew about the owner, Bourdain admitted he knew next to nothing, a truthful but disastrous answer when the owner was actually asking about his knowledge of meat. This incident highlighted Bourdain's tendency towards self-sabotage and his sometimes blunt honesty. Eventually, Bourdain landed an opportunity with Pino Luongo, a well-known and somewhat feared restaurateur. He started as a sous chef at La Madre, one of Luongo's Italian restaurants, with the promise of becoming executive chef at a new venture, Coco Pazzo Titro. This marked a turning point, as Bourdain, who previously dismissed Italian cuisine, began to appreciate the simplicity and quality of ingredients in traditional Tuscan cooking. He was impressed by the dedication to fresh, homemade ingredients and the skill of the kitchen staff. Working for Pino Luongo was intense. Bourdain describes a high-pressure environment filled with politics, paranoia, and a constant need to prove oneself. He details the frantic pace of opening a new restaurant, the challenges of assembling a team, and the constant scrutiny from Luongo and his inner circle. He found himself navigating a complex web of loyalties and rivalries, and quickly realized he was out of his depth in terms of understanding the inner workings of Luongo's empire. Bourdain's experience was further complicated by his own lack of extensive Italian culinary knowledge. While he could cook, he relied heavily on his chef de cuisine, a skilled but difficult personality. The author found himself caught in the middle of power struggles and constantly trying to manage a chaotic kitchen. He describes a sense of being overwhelmed and questioning his own abilities. Ultimately, Bourdain's time with Pino Luongo ended with a quiet dismissal. He realized he wasn't a fit for the demanding and cutthroat environment, and he was relieved to leave. Despite the difficulties, he acknowledged that the experience taught him valuable lessons about Italian cuisine, kitchen management, and the importance of knowing one's limits. He even managed to poach some talented cooks from Luongo's organization for future opportunities, a small victory in a challenging chapter of his career. Bourdain's story is a raw and honest look at the demanding world of professional kitchens, the personalities that thrive within them, and the personal toll it can take on a chef. Dessert. Anthony Bourdain's day begins before dawn, not with an alarm, but with a deeply ingrained habit from his Bigfoot training, a playful reference to his demanding profession. Even in the darkness, his mind is already racing, planning the day's food orders and how to handle the expected rush. Friday is particularly intense, anticipating large weekend orders, mountains of produce, meat, seafood, and everything else a busy restaurant needs. He mentally sorts through the tasks, figuring out who will do what and when, a constant process of triage in a chaotic environment. As he goes through his morning routine, Bourdain continues to mentally prepare. He reviews what's left from previous days, what needs to be used immediately, and what can wait. He notes the local news, not for general interest, but for how it might affect business. Good weather and no big sporting events mean a packed house. This influences his menu planning. Elaborate dishes are out of the question for weekend crowds. He needs quick, popular items like shrimp, lobster, and steak, things that appeal to a broader audience. He crafts a fish special grilled tuna, designed for speed and ease, knowing his grill cook will be swamped. Traveling to the restaurant, Bourdain continues to refine his plans. He decides on a cockle appetizer, a simple one-pan dish, and a roasted pheasant as the meat special, choosing it for its relative ease of preparation. By the time he arrives at Les Halles, he has a clear vision for the day, a testament to his experience and meticulous planning. The restaurant is quiet when he arrives, music playing softly. He checks reservations and previous night's numbers, assessing the potential for a busy night. He reviews the manager's log, learning about a late-night confrontation between his grill cook and some demanding customers. This is a typical glimpse into the raw, often volatile, atmosphere of a professional kitchen. He then begins the physical work of the day, checking deliveries, organizing supplies, and preparing ingredients. Bourdain's kitchen is a well-oiled machine, but it requires constant attention. He oversees everything, from prepping vegetables to making sauces, coordinating the efforts of his diverse team. He relies on his staff's strengths: Carlos, the soup maker; Omar, the guard manger expert; Segundo, the incredibly efficient prep cook. He navigates the challenges of a small kitchen space, juggling multiple tasks and anticipating potential problems. Throughout the day, Bourdain deals with a constant stream of interruptions: deliveries, phone calls, staff issues. He's a demanding boss, quick to anger, but also fiercely protective of his team. He handles a frustrating phone call with a produce supplier, showcasing his willingness to confront anyone who threatens the quality of his ingredients. He balances the need for control with a degree of trust in his staff, allowing them to work independently while maintaining overall direction. As the lunch rush begins, the pace intensifies. Bourdain expertly manages the flow of orders, coordinating the different stations and ensuring dishes are prepared quickly and accurately. He's a master of multitasking, constantly moving, tasting, and adjusting. He's also a realist, acknowledging the limitations of his kitchen and the need to prioritize. He finds moments of enjoyment amidst the chaos, like cooking pasta and listening to music. The afternoon is a flurry of activity, preparing specials, receiving deliveries, and dealing with unexpected issues like a missing tomato order. Bourdain's attention to detail is relentless, ensuring everything is perfect before service begins. He holds a tasting for the waitstaff, explaining the specials and emphasizing the importance of accurate descriptions. As dinner service approaches, the energy in the kitchen reaches a fever pitch. Bourdain is in his element, expediting orders, coordinating the team, and maintaining control. He's a demanding leader, pushing his staff to their limits, but also inspiring loyalty and respect. He navigates the challenges of a packed house, dealing with demanding customers and unexpected requests. Finally, as the dinner rush subsides, Bourdain can begin to unwind. He checks on the stocks and prepped ingredients, making plans for the next day. He reflects on the evening's successes and failures, always striving to improve. Despite the exhaustion, he finds a sense of satisfaction in a job well done and heads to a local bar for a well-deserved drink, already thinking about the challenges that tomorrow will bring. Anthony Bourdain paints a vivid picture of the intense world behind restaurant kitchens, focusing on the crucial role of the sous chef and his own experiences navigating this demanding environment. He describes his ideal sous chef as someone incredibly close, even closer than his wife, due to the sheer amount of time spent together. This isn't about disrespecting his wife, Nancy, but acknowledging the unique bond forged in the heat of service. He introduces Stephen Tempel, his sous chef for many years, as a complex character, a talented cook with a knack for getting things done, often through unconventional and sometimes questionable methods. Bourdain details Stephen's almost unbelievable ability to solve problems, from fixing broken equipment to acquiring hard-to-find ingredients, even resorting to slightly shady tactics. Stephen wasn't just a cook. He was an information gatherer, a fixer, and someone who could handle situations Bourdain couldn't be seen to be involved in. He was, in essence, Bourdain's shadow, taking care of everything from getting the lowdown from office staff to procuring, well, just about anything. This reliance on Stephen allowed Bourdain to focus on the bigger picture, knowing his kitchen was running smoothly, even when he wasn't there. The author recounts meeting Stephen at the Supper Club, a massive and bustling restaurant nightclub in New York City. He describes the club's chaotic energy, hosting diverse crowds and events, from swing dancing to raves. Before Stephen's arrival, Bourdain was inspired by another chef, Jimmy Sears, whose talent reignited his passion for cooking. However, Sears was often absent, leaving Bourdain to manage the kitchen's day-to-day operations. Stephen's arrival changed everything. Bourdain emphasizes the sheer volume of food the Supper Club produced, requiring incredible organization and a resilient team. He explains how Stephen, despite his flaws, quickly became indispensable. He was a whirlwind of energy, capable of working through exhaustion and still delivering results. Bourdain acknowledges his initial reservations about Stephen's chaotic lifestyle, but recognizes his unwavering dedication to the kitchen. He describes a moment where Stephen continued working after slicing his hand, demonstrating a commitment that solidified his position as sous chef. The author delves into the unique language and culture of the professional kitchen, a world filled with colorful insults, slang, and a dark sense of humor. He explains how cooks use crude language not out of malice, but as a way to bond, test each other, and navigate the intense pressure of the job. Bourdain details the specific jargon used terms for equipment, orders, and even people, creating a sense of camaraderie and shared experience. He acknowledges the potentially offensive nature of this language, but defends it as a necessary part of the kitchen's dynamic. Bourdain reflects on the constant cycle of chaos and calm in a busy kitchen, describing the brief moments of peace before a rush and the frantic energy that follows. He highlights the importance of a strong team and the ability to rely on each other under pressure. He emphasizes that success in the kitchen isn't just about cooking skills. It's about resilience, adaptability, and a willingness to embrace the madness. Ultimately, Bourdain's narrative is a testament to the demanding, often bizarre, but ultimately rewarding world of professional cooking and the unique relationships forged within it. Anthony Bourdain pulls back the curtain on the often chaotic and intense world of professional kitchens, revealing it's a place of strong personalities, tough decisions, and a unique kind of loyalty. He begins by describing the runners, kitchen staff who act as a bridge between the chefs and the waiters, often former waiters themselves. Bourdain favors runners who are energetic and dedicated, almost to a fault, willing to do whatever the chef asks, even tasks that might seem a little shady. He sees them as valuable for more than just delivering food. They're his eyes and ears on the dining room floor, gathering information and even acting as enforcers to keep things running smoothly. The author then introduces other essential, yet often overlooked, roles like the night porter, the person who handles the dirty, unpleasant work after everyone else has gone home. Bourdain acknowledges the potential for dishonesty in this position, but accepts it as a necessary evil, understanding the job attracts those who might take advantage. He also discusses the symbiotic relationship between chefs and bartenders, a mutually beneficial arrangement where the chef gets access to alcohol and the bartender gets well fed. The bartender, Bourdain notes, is a valuable source of information, privy to gossip and happenings both inside and outside the kitchen. A significant portion of the chapter centers around a frustrating situation with a baker named Adam, a wildly talented but deeply unreliable individual. Adam repeatedly calls Bourdain, needing help with his sourdough starter, affectionately called the bitch. because he's too preoccupied with his own chaotic life to handle it himself. Bourdain reluctantly agrees to help, despite his annoyance, because Adam's bread is exceptional and worth the trouble. This illustrates a recurring theme. Bourdain tolerates difficult behavior from those who possess rare skill. Bourdain reflects on the difficult choices chefs sometimes face, recalling a friend who fired a cook who later committed suicide. This event deeply affected his friend and forced Bourdain to confront the weight of responsibility that comes with managing people in a high-pressure environment. He describes the kitchen as a lifeboat, where tough decisions must be made for the survival of the whole crew, even if those decisions have painful consequences. He acknowledges a certain ruthlessness is required to maintain order and efficiency. The author emphasizes the unique perspective developed by those who work in a kitchen, a slightly paranoid, insular worldview. He fosters this mindset in his staff, rewarding loyalty and dedication. Ultimately, Bourdain portrays the restaurant world as a demanding, often brutal, but ultimately rewarding place, populated by complex characters and driven by a shared passion for food. He's a leader who understands the need for both talent and control, willing to navigate the messy realities of human nature to achieve culinary excellence. Coffee and a cigarette. Anthony Bourdain begins this chapter acknowledging that he isn't the best chef in the world, but he's seen a lot of great ones. He quickly establishes that true culinary excellence isn't just about skill, it's about dedication, resources, and a team. He points out that the famous chefs everyone knows have advantages: bigger kitchens, better training for their staff, and plenty of money to spend on fancy equipment. He's a little annoyed by celebrity chefs who get famous for being on TV, but he really respects the cooks who quietly work hard and make amazing food every day. The chapter then shifts focus to Scott Bryan, the chef at Veritas, whom Bourdain considers a true culinary ideal. Bryan isn't flashy or seeking fame, he just focuses on cooking really well. Other chefs talk about Bryan with a mix of respect and worry, almost like he's setting an impossibly high standard. Bourdain describes how Bryan has built a reputation among cooks as someone who is serious, dedicated, and uncompromising. Bourdain contrasts his own kitchen style with Bryan's. He admits his kitchens are loud, chaotic, and a bit rough around the edges, filled with people he enjoys despite their flaws. He likes a bit of a wild atmosphere. Bryan's kitchen, however, is calm, organized, and focused on quality above all else. Bourdain realizes that everything he thought he knew about kitchens doesn't apply to Veritas. He acknowledges that his own approach isn't the only way to run a successful kitchen. The author details his visit to Veritas, noting the stylish dining room and the serious, well-dressed staff. He finds Bryan himself surprisingly down to earth, wearing a simple dishwasher shirt and listening to rock music. This comforts Bourdain, who sees a bit of himself in Bryan. However, he quickly realizes they are very different. Bryan's background is very different from Bourdain's privileged upbringing. Bryan worked his way up, learning skills and gaining experience through hard work, while Bourdain admits he always expected things to come easier. Bourdain traces Bryan's career, highlighting his dedication to learning and improving. He worked with many famous chefs, including Eric Ripert and Gray Kuntz, and even spent time in France honing his skills. What sets Bryan apart is his willingness to do whatever it takes to get better, even if it means taking a step back or learning a new skill, like pastry. Bourdain contrasts this with his own tendency to chase money and maintain a certain lifestyle. Bourdain notes Bryan's dislike of the celebrity chef culture and his reluctance to seek publicity. His partner, Gino Diaferia, explains that Bryan would rather focus on the food than on being famous. Bourdain emphasizes that Bryan's priority is always the quality of the food, not the lifestyle or the recognition. He describes the atmosphere in the Veritas kitchen as remarkably calm and efficient, with a focus on precision and consistency. The author is impressed by the attention to detail in Bryan's kitchen, from the perfectly diced shallots to the spotless workstations. He observes that the staff is highly skilled and dedicated, and that even the dishwasher is knowledgeable about wine. Bourdain is struck by the quality of the food, which is honest, flavorful, and beautifully presented. He realizes that Brian's commitment to excellence is the reason he has earned 3 stars, even if he doesn't care about earning more. Bourdain concludes by reflecting on his own career and acknowledging that Brian's dedication and focus on quality are what separate him from many other chefs. He admits that he might have taken a different path, prioritizing money and lifestyle over pure culinary skill. He ends the chapter with a sense of respect and admiration for Brian, recognizing him as a true master of his craft. He and Brian share a love for simple, well-made food, like beef bourguignon, and a shared understanding of the dedication it takes to be a great cook. Anthony Bourdain begins by reflecting on a life lived dangerously, acknowledging numerous close calls and a surprising longevity despite a history of risky behavior. He admits he expected his adventurous phase to be over, finding contentment in his successful New York restaurant career and stable personal life. However, a surprising request from his partners at Les Halles to consult at their new Tokyo location throws him back into the unknown. The author's initial concern isn't the travel itself, but the 14-hour flight and the inability to smoke. He details his frantic search for Valium, his last-minute camaraderie with fellow smokers at the airport, and the discomfort of the long journey. This sets the stage for his arrival in Tokyo, a city he admits to knowing almost nothing about, a place vastly different from his familiar New York. He emphasizes his lack of preparation, having not bothered with guidebooks or language lessons, relying instead on his instincts and a love for sushi. Bourdain vividly describes Tokyo as overwhelming and alien, a sprawling metropolis of neon lights, crowded streets, and unfamiliar customs. He recounts his arrival at the hotel, the bicycle ride through chaotic traffic, and the initial culture shock of navigating a foreign city. The Les Halles Tokyo restaurant, while mirroring the New York location and design, feels sterile and new compared to the worn, comfortable atmosphere he's used to. His primary task is to ensure the Tokyo kitchen maintains the authenticity of Les Halles' French working-class cuisine. He quickly discovers challenges with sourcing ingredients, as Japanese standards and costs differ significantly. He notes the dedication of the Japanese kitchen staff, their willingness to learn, and the cultural differences in work ethic and communication. He observes the unique customs, like the shouted greetings to arriving customers and the meticulous cleanliness of the kitchen. Bourdain's exploration of Tokyo extends beyond the restaurant. He describes wandering the streets, immersing himself in the city's vibrant nightlife, and experiencing the unique energy of Shibuya. He recounts a particularly memorable meal at a small, hidden sushi bar, guided by his French partner, Philippe, where he indulged in an extraordinary and seemingly endless array of fresh seafood. This experience highlights his willingness to embrace the unfamiliar and his appreciation for authentic culinary experiences. He then details a visit to the Tsukuji fish market, marveling at the sheer scale and variety of seafood. He describes the chaotic energy of the market, the freshness of the products, and his own adventurous breakfast at a local stall. This experience reinforces his fascination with Japanese culture and cuisine. He also recounts a promotional event for his translated book, navigating the complexities of Japanese business etiquette and media appearances. Bourdain reflects on the demanding nature of the restaurant industry, offering advice to aspiring chefs. He warns potential career changers about the harsh realities of the profession: long hours, low pay, and relentless pressure. He stresses the importance of commitment, learning Spanish to communicate with a significant portion of the workforce, and maintaining honesty and integrity. He shares anecdotes about his own past mistakes and the importance of avoiding shortcuts or compromising principles. The author concludes with a candid reflection on the physical toll of his career, detailing the numerous scars and injuries accumulated over decades in professional kitchens. Despite the pain and hardship, he expresses a deep love for the work, the camaraderie, and the satisfaction of creating a memorable dining experience. He acknowledges the sacrifices he's made, the relationships tested, and the enduring allure of the kitchen, even as he contemplates the future. He ends with a sense of acceptance, recognizing that despite the challenges, he wouldn't trade his life for anything. And that brings us to the end of our summary of this book. I hope you found it insightful and valuable. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe for more. Your support helps us bring you more great content. Thanks for watching.